Madam Mayor, probably not going to make anybody happy, but that's, I move to adopt the suggested changes by P&Z to the LRE ordinance with two amendments. One is to raise the CUP threshold to more than 100,000 square feet, and two, eliminate the community meeting. And I'm not sure if the resolution for the design manual is being considered separately, whether we should discuss any of that now, or that's a point of order, or can we discuss that along with the
Let's see here.
LRE ordinance?
No,
Because I had one change to the design manual.
Right, they are bundled together here in this ordinance, and we have an adoption of a resolution to be followed by this. So we can discuss the resolution components separately. Bill, did you have a preference?
Yeah, there are two discrete actions for the council this evening. One was a proposed ordinance and one is a proposed resolution, but nothing precludes you from discussing both because they do relate to each other.
Okay. I would take the site planning for the future site planning, let's see, site adaptability and flexibility, I would apply that only to 100,000 square feet more, too, because, and if I get a second for the purposes of discussion, I'll explain my position why. And ask the courtesy of a second for discussion purposes.
Okay, we have a motion. Do I hear a second? I don't. Okay.
Okay.
Anybody else? Tom?
Well, I would move that we approve the proposed ordinance as proposed by Planning and Zoning Commission.
Okay, and then there's a follow-up here on that. I would just ask for the courtesy whether you choose to do it under suspension of the rules.
Well, sure. Under suspension of rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings and be read by title and published by summary.
Okay. Do we have a motion? Do I hear a second?
Well, for the purposes of discussion, I would give you the courtesy that I wish someone had given me, but I will second that for purposes of discussion.
Okay, we have Tom's motion and Sue's second. Discussion. Tom?
Well, I have actually participated in a conditional use permit hearing as a person running a business. And that hearing was here in Moscow, and it was before I was on council. And I did not find it onerous. I did not find it objectionable. And I actually felt like it was a good way for me to communicate with the public and the neighbors of the business, where the business was going. The most difficult part of the conditional use permit hearing that I participated in was waiting for it to arrive on the agenda, as I had to wait 4.5 hours for it to take place, and it was a longer wait than my best marathon time, so I was really kind of surprised about that. But it was a good opportunity for people to come and speak about the proposal. What concerns me about removing all conditional use permit opportunities within this particular ordinance is that there would be no real opportunity for the public to come out and speak. And I think that that is important regardless of what kind of administrative regulations and rules that we have for businesses to develop in Moscow. I think it's important for us to give an opportunity for the public to speak to the future growth of the town for objects that are going to be very visible on that aerial map right there. I just think it's a good opportunity to allow people to come and have an opportunity to speak, regardless of what they say. I also, there was some concern about the planning and zoning design manual review for some of the larger expansions. Again, that's not a public hearing piece, but it is an opportunity for for a public airing of what's being proposed. And again, I just think that that's a good opportunity for us to hear those things. And I do think that neighborhood meetings serve a purpose. Sometimes they can be run better than other times, but I think that there's an opportunity again for the public to hear those things. I think the P&Z has had to deal with a contentious issue, as they mentioned, and I think that the work that they've done with the 5 workshops since between May and August shows that they've been considering lots of different concerns, and that they came up with a compromise that I think allows us to move forward on this issue, and that's why I wanted to support what they were proposing outright.
Wayne?
Kelly made the comment, and I appreciated what he said about you need to respect your commissions. Let's not lose sight of the fact that every council member sitting up here has sat on commissions. In fact, I sat on the Planning and Zoning Commission that made the recommendations, and we spent many man-hours not only in planning and zoning meetings, but subcommittee meetings and making recommendations to the City Council to modify the large retail establishment ordinance, and the council flat turned it down. I know exactly how that feels, but that's part of being on the commissions. Once again, all of us have experience, and 1, 2, 3 of us actually on planning and zoning. One of the studies that I've looked at 13 different communities that sized anywhere from 9,000 to 231,000 in population. These communities which Target happened to be looking at them to locate. Every one of those communities had a higher population within a 25-mile radius than Moscow does. Every one of them had access to an interstate exchange no further than 3 miles away. And every one of them had a higher median income than Latah County has. None of them had a conditional use permit. We seem to be really worried that Moscow, Idaho is going to be suddenly inundated with major big box stores. We've had this on the books for 6 years now with a conditional use permit, and there's been no applications. Why? Well, you could argue that it could be the basis of the economy. It could be the basis that was asking, we've already got more strikes against us than these other communities have, plus we were the only one with a conditional use permit, and none of the others requested it. When it comes time for economic development, and that's a real broad term, I get very concerned as more and more government regulation comes into effect. And for that reason, I'm not going to support a conditional use permit in that. I very much appreciate, Art, what planning and zoning has done. I know you put a lot of hours in it, and I think as a whole, the entire thing is pretty good. But the conditional use permit, and Sue, I'm sorry I didn't second yours, but I just will not support a conditional use permit.
Sue?
Although I'm personally convinced that the design manual and other improvements to the LRE ordinance proposed by P&Z are sufficient protection of the community interest without the need of a CUP, clearly there's a wide divide in the community over a CUP. P&Z was polarized between 65,000 and no CUP at all. They worked very hard and came to a hard-won compromise, and I respect the time and energy devoted to a difficult task that was thrashed out with courtesy and great emotion and passion. And our community and country need compromise, especially when we can't seem to get consensus. The reason I was proposing a larger square footage, it would allow current businesses to grow and would have allowed the Walmart plus about 5%, the old Walmart plus about 5%, and I didn't think that that would hinder any of our local businesses that wanted to expand. The reason I was thinking that there could be a place for a CUP was to allay the fears of those who are concerned about the effect of large-scale edifices in Moscow. And I do believe it's fear that drives that concern. And I was going to quote some of your points about Target, about that fear probably isn't going to happen, that there's not going to have some influx of huge buildings at any imminent time. But the other reason given, and I did hear people actually admit this, is to keep an enterprise out that the community may not want. And that's like punishing all the over-legal loads, even if it's I-beams for needed bridge repairs, because you oppose the Alberta tar sands. I don't think we should punish all businesses because someone doesn't like what one of the business is doing. And the reason I wanted to get rid of the community meeting was that if we had a CUP at any level that takes the place of the community meeting, it gives it the power to actually make a decision and respond, which the city council can do, where a community meeting just ends up being frustration on both sides because it bears no legal weight. So that's why I was speaking out of courtesy and respect for hard-won compromise, and that's what I wanted to do. But I can't support it at 65. If it isn't 100, I'd rather do without it.
I think it's at 90, isn't it?
90, well, at 90 or even, yeah, that's right. Even at 90, I can't support it.
Walter?
Thank you, ma'am. Last Thursday, 4 of the council members attended a meeting of the Inland Northwest Partners in Clarkston. It was starts a seminar. It wasn't a seminar. It was a meeting of economic development, interested persons, elected officials, and the theme was manufacturing. A remark that was made by a manager with ATK, which has been in Lewiston in one form or another for, 40 years. It's the bullet manufacturer. They've been bought a couple of times, and now they're part of a very large national operation. He made the comment that the Lewiston-Clarkston Valley is very welcoming to manufacturing. And he did that within a few moments of concluding his remarks, and there was a break taken. And Councilman Brown and I happened to end up standing next to each other, and I reiterated that comment by the manager from ATK, and I said, "And what do we welcome, Tim?" I will let Tim tell you what his answer to me was if he wishes to do so, but I cannot think of anything. We seem to have our reasons for not wanting this, that, the other, the next thing, on and on. I found Mrs. Perez's comments as the president of the ASUI very interesting, because I had already had that same thought brought to me by someone that isn't a student at the University of Idaho. That you have students that come here, and I know they ought to come just for the wonderful research university that we have. But they come for many reasons. They come because their parents came here, or their older brother came here, or they just like the Vandals. All kinds of reasons. And one of them could very well be the opportunity that a student has, or it may be their parents' belief, for certain activities here in town. And I hope that doesn't include a large bar scene, whether it does or not. The University of Idaho added 10 students this year. Students or freshmen, Chris? Students. 10. Now that was not, I'm sure, totally because of my perceived non-welcoming attitude. But I would submit that it doesn't help. If we're not anti-business, as some people have said at the podium, I certainly don't think we're welcoming. Now, if you just think about the LRE And if it wasn't a large retail establishment, just a large establishment ordinance with all of its provisions, we might not even have the U of I here today had it been in effect back in the 1800s. Because look at what it did to the community. I mean, who would want to run a perfectly good farming community by plopping down a big university in it? I contend that the 2005 large retail establishment ordinance was an anti-Walmart ordinance. That's my belief. I wish Walmart didn't exist, because maybe then it wouldn't have occurred, and we could have had a Target, like everybody tells me they won't. I've been in a Target, I think, once in my life, because we don't have any near here. But at any rate, it was an anti-Walmart ordinance. And I was told that Walmart has never, ever reopened a store in their history. I don't know if that's true or not. But people as late as last week still do not believe Walmart will reopen in Moscow, Idaho. It's just amazing to me that with all the work they're doing out there that people could still think they won't reopen. I guess the economy could go so far south that they wouldn't reopen, and then we're all going to be just in real trouble. But I would like to think that the city council's letter to Walmart, written January a year or two ago, imploring them to reopen, with a letter, as I remember it, that had no conditions. It didn't talk about sustainability. It didn't talk about only if you're in the present site. Just please reopen in Moscow. And I'm pretty sure the fact that this council a few months ago changed to 30% their ability to enlarge did make a big difference in their willingness to reopen in Moscow. So all of that is to say that the things like the LRE do keep Moscow just like it is. And there may not be another person to come down the gangplank or another student that will screw up what I had when I got here in 1989, because I liked it because of what it was and when I came here, and I don't want anybody else to come in and have what I've got. I just don't believe, as somebody else said here this evening, that we can remain a viable community and a viable university community if we look at things that way. Someone else made the comment that if we leave big business alone, they will just do the right thing. I do not necessarily believe that. We know that they don't just do the right thing. But I would contend that if we restrict them and put handcuffs on them, as the LRE does, that they will do nothing. They will not come to Moscow. Thank you, ma'am.
Is there other discussion? Dan?
I promise not to be as verbose as Walter, but I do agree with the idea of what do we welcome. That, you know, we talked about this earlier today, and it just struck me. You know, we as the citizens don't seem to welcome ball fields. We don't seem to welcome a relocated high school. You know, there was obviously a bunch of people that didn't want to welcome a Walmart. And how can we expect what we want to come here to want to come here if we don't welcome what some may deem undesirable? And why are we only targeting large-scale businesses? Again, maybe it's absurd, but why shouldn't the public get to speak on when any sort of business feels like opening? If somebody decides in a permitted zone to open up a drive-through coffee shop, that's obviously going to have an impact on traffic in that area. So why shouldn't that have a public hearing? Why shouldn't a pet store in a permitted zone that's going to move in next to me, say I live next to a zone, but am I going to want to listen to barking dogs? But it's permitted next to me. Should we have a public meeting regarding that? again, these are rhetorical questions, but that makes it something to think about. Where do you draw the line? I can remember when, I don't remember exactly what it was about, but I remember Gerard Connolly coming in here and saying that Tri-State increased its business ever since Walmart opened. They hadn't had a down month since Walmart opened. So I have a hard time seeing, when I realize they're not the smallest store in town, but there's a lot of stuff in town that doesn't get affected by whatever else opens in town because we have the specialty shops here. We have a vibrant downtown that I don't think is going to get affected by anything that happens, whether it's a CUP is required for it or not.
Tim?
Thank you. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank Bill and his department for the great job of putting Planning and Zoning Commission's thoughts to your proposal. I know your entire department worked extremely hard at getting this done. I attended most of the Planning and Zoning Commission meetings from the April-May time frame, or April when we had the joint P&Z Council meeting, until the public hearing on August 24th, just to kind of find out what P&Z was thinking. At that public meeting that was held August 24th, 13 people spoke. The 6 most ardent speakers to not change the existing large retail establishment ordinance eventually, in their discussion, their public testimony, got around to Walmart. And the current ordinance's ability to keep them from expanding from their existing store to a large retail store that they wanted to put in out by the cemetery. To create an ordinance that one of the editors to the paper called draconian, to keep one single retailer out of town is a mistake. If you will allow me, Dr. Pierce, at the testimony, because you're one of the speakers at the public hearing on the 24th, you supported the revised LER, but said that the CUP is very important and must stay. You also made a statement that I picked up on that I think is the crux of the whole part of why I'm not going to support the ordinance as written. You also said that it was a very political process, that the conditional use permit process was very political. And your feeling that the CUP is political is a feeling that I also share. It is the feeling that concerns me the most about the proposed ordinance. In my opinion, it creates uncertainty. It creates uncertainty for the developer. No matter how many square feet they're proposing. So, if you all want economic development, if you want jobs, you want an expanded tax base to provide the city services that we all seem to want, there cannot be uncertainty for development. They just won't come. They haven't come. Let the permitted process work within the design manual. I request that you all make the process certain.
Is there further discussion?